So thank you all very much for being here. I'm Irv Varconi. I'm the current chair of the FJMC Committee to Combat Anti-Semitism. And this is our periodical webinar that we do from time to time. We've had very informative webinars in the past. The most recent was a discussion about a program at Temple Sinai in Los Angeles, where we discussed an initiative about that synagogue for 11th and 12th graders in how to prepare them, how to get them ready when they graduate and will go to college or work in dealing with anti-Semitism. And we've had other issues as well that people have found interesting. So to introduce my friend, Dr. Cary Schwartzbach, he was, not anymore, he was an orthopedist. Now he's retired, though he's a very young man to retire. Here in Fairfax, Virginia, I received his medical degree from Columbia University, Vagelos College of Physicians and Surgeons, and have been practiced for more than 20 years. His special interest was in the management of orthopedic knee injuries, including my son many, many years ago.
And an old biography. I'm there almost 40 years. And I do shoulders and elbows now.
Correct. And my son did grow to be 6'1", so it must have worked. Nothing had hindered on that. But that's the professional one. And from a friend viewpoint, we are both members of Congregation Olam Tikva, which has many fine FJMC members, including a number of past Seaboard Region presidents, myself and Bruce Gordon and Bob Watts. But even more so, and I'll just take a minute of personal privilege here. When Cary and I found each other at Olam Tikva some 30 years ago now, plus a third guy who's maybe he'll be on here, maybe not, named Abe, we began to talk Jewish geography, and you won't believe the story. So I grew up in Queens, New York. Where did Cary and Abe grow up? Queens, New York. My father had a little Shomer Shabbos bakery on Union Turnpike. And guess who had a butcher shop next to a Shomer Shabbos butcher shop next to the baker shop? Our friend Abe's father. And suddenly I said, I think I knew your dad, but I didn't know you. And then we kept talking, and you won't believe this guy, but this is the true story. This is a true story. And then somehow we realized that there was an electrician who serviced both the bakery and the butcher. And whose father was that? Cary's father. So here we are, the three of us in one shul in a foreign country called Virginia, that we had all left our parents. They've passed now, and but they living in Queens, or they retired elsewhere. But we came here to the promised land. So three young kids from Queens, New York, whose dads knew each other, worked with each other, and were Holocaust survivors as well. Cary's parents and my parents. And one more thing, and maybe Cary will talk about it. So what country is it that, or what language did my parents and Cary's parents speak?
My mother, my mother spoke Hungarian.
Hungarian. I don't know how many
Hungarian.
connections there are, but this
Yeah,
is a story. We should like make it a movie, right, Cary?
right.
In
Should.
any case,
And he used to also say the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker.
that's the punchline. You got it?
Ah,
Okay, all right. Anyway, and we're just talking one day, and Cary informs me of these developments, which I thought hadn't been in the medical profession for decades. Um, my personal story about that is that my wife's father, who's now 99, after he came back from the Battle of the Bulge in World War II, he wanted to be a doctor. So he goes to college in Jersey, where he was from, at St. Peter's College, of course, right? Where else would a Jewish kid go but to a nice Jesuit school? And then he wanted to go to medical school. This was, I guess, like 1948, 49, something like that. Wouldn't let him into medical school because he was Jewish. He ended up getting a doctorate at Columbia as well, had a wonderful career. But I thought all this was ancient history. Cary's going to talk to us that this is not such ancient history. So let me start off with a question, Cary, and then we'll do this
yeah.
for about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll take questions from everyone. And again, feel free, guys, to put it online or just to raise your hand, and we'll start talking as well. All right, so Cary, who is the American Jewish Medical Association, and why was it formed?
So, surprisingly, up until last year, there was no American Jewish Medical Association. There's a Catholic, a Hindu, a Muslim, a Palestinian, etc. Um, this really formed in the aftermath of October 7th. Um, and despite our expectation that there would be some sort of welling up of sympathy, it actually turned out to be the opposite. A lot of this anti-Semitism throughout different fields now almost became permitted, if you will. And unfortunately, as Irv has alluded to, it has appeared in medicine as well. Um, we Jews really know what happens when politics and get involved in medicine, and when the focus of medicine is not on the patient but on a political cause. We know what's happened from that. So it started off as a WhatsApp chat group with Dr. Halas, who is a facial plastic surgeon in New York. And it just slowly grew to like 900 something people on the chat. And it was apparent we needed to start an organization. So that was started. And we became official last December. So December of 23. And then by January, we had our 501. And it's just grown exponentially. Our biggest problem is it's like grown like a mushroom. So it's been, how to really manage it. But we partner with almost every 3 and 4 letter advocacy group. We have education programs. So we're filling that area in medicine. But the one thing is we don't only want to be one of another 3 and 4 letter group that's fighting anti-Semitism. We also want to make it a home for Jewish doctors. And I shouldn't say doctors, because we're one of the few medical associations that has across the board, nurses, PT, social workers, chaplains. We actually have chaplains, we have veterinarians, we have dentists. We even have friends of AJMA, so even all of you can join as well as a friend of AJMA. But we want it to be a place where, in addition to fighting anti-Semitism and advocating for Israel, we want it to be a place where Jews can come together in the healthcare field, socially, educationally, medically. So
That is terrific. And before we go on, we do want to put a plug in that anybody can join the AJMA. Is that correct?
that is correct. Because if you're not in healthcare, you can join as a friend.
And all those details are on the website that I gave you, but they have various rate structures. For instance, there are allied health professionals, 180 a year, doctors, 360 per year, and so forth and so on. And you even have a segment for veterinarians.
Yes, yes,
And by the way, students can join as well. Don't have to be
yes.
medical students, but any
Yeah.
student can join for as little as $18. So if any of you
And
would like to do that and
yeah,
support it, yes.
yeah. And it's periodically there have been intermittently donations to cover the students' fees as well. I don't know if the last fund for went dry, but periodically there's a person who donates to cover it. So yeah.
Excellent, excellent. So please all join and tell your friends and your doctors if they don't know about it. And since I've gotten to know this from Cary, I've seen some other meetings I've gone with some Jewish doctors, and the two I saw of late, neither knew about this. So there's more to be out there.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to get the word out because I mean, it's just it's hard to break into the arena we have. I mean, we're in press. Obviously, it's hard for us to break into New York Times and Washington Post press, but New York Post, Jewish Insider, the Jurist, we have slowly getting our feet into to the pool of journalism, so to speak.
Excellent,
I made that up, by the way, that term.
excellent. Cary, what is the historical connection to dealing with anti-Semitism today in the medical profession as in the past? And I just shared the story of my father-in-law. And this was, again, after World War II. So that's what, like 70 years ago.
Yeah. So I have another story. So one of the residents we at Fairfax we trained the Georgetown residents. They come for a quarter of their orthopedic training is done at Fairfax Hospital, and I always have like my Jewish radar on, and I find the Jewish kids, and one of them who's local, his grandfather started at Columbia and then had the flu and had to take off 2 years. When he came back, they wouldn't take him, and he wound up going to Arkansas. And he had a name that no one realized he was Jewish because it was so far in the South that they said, sure, come on in. They didn't know he was Jewish, and he got his degree. It's a little different now. I think, anti-Semitism is a very unique hatred in that it comes from both sides, the right, the left. You have Jews are vilified for being white, they're vilified for not being white. They're vilified for being capitalist, they're vilified for being communist. And so, in the past, it was really, we don't want Jews in it because they're Jews. We don't want them in medicine. We don't want them in our hospitals. They're not white. And obviously, things changed. The biggest thing that did change, and unfortunately for your father-in-law, it didn't happen right away. But after World War II, anti-Semitism rates in America dropped drastically, in part because people became more educated, more worldly, and quite frankly, sympathy for the Jewish story in Europe. But that has slowly changed, and now it's Jews are privileged. We take pride in the fact that look how many Jews are in professions in law and medicine, and the other side kind of looks at it and says, see, that proves that you're a white supremacist. So that's the really big difference. The Soviet Union, when they became really anti-Semitic in the 70s, they didn't do the same thing that Stalin did. They started hiding everything behind anti-Zionism, which became sort of their way of having excusable anti-Semitism, if you will. And that's what a lot of it is disguised as today. We don't hate Jews. We just hate Zionists. We hate Israel. We're okay with Jewish people, but that's their way of disguising it. So that's where it is now, and the stories that we get are horrific. There was a post placed in Chicago. Someone posted a hypothetical patient to the a listserv for mental health mental health professionals, and they said, would you treat this person? And the person in their description was a Zionist. And so as soon as everyone who said, sure, I'd have no problem, they put them on a dox. They exposed them. They went to, and they put them on these, telling their comrades, please do not have anything to do with them. Do not send people to them, et cetera, et cetera. So that's really a good example of how that has happened. So that's the main difference. The other main difference is we have agency today. Irv, your parents and I had no one to really, speak for them. We now have agency. We can do things. It's hard, but we have the ability because of in part because of where we live.
Yep, very good comments. Thank you on that. How does the AJMA collaborate with other medical associations?
So we're working on that. One of the problems we have is there are issues in certain fields where there is a lot of anti-Israel issues. So we're working with certain academies, Academy of Pediatrics, Academy of Family Medicine. We find that the primary cares tend to be a little bit more progressive and have bought into a lot of this anti-Israel narrative. So it's been hard. We do have now outside of the States, I helped form something called the Global Jewish Health Alliance. We partnered with the Israeli Medical Association, as well as the national medical organizations in Europe, South Africa, Australia, Canada, and the rest of the Americas to form this alliance to help us combat the sort of the worldwide anti-Semitism and especially the academic boycott of Israel. So that has been a struggle to really have our story heard by medical societies. We're working on that. We have training for anti-Semitism. We now have curricula that the medical schools are starting to put in on the role of anti-Semitism in medicine, both historical as well as current, as well as what is anti-Semitism? What is it? People see, the Jews are rich, they control the media. How is it that there's possibly hatred against them? And so that's a big part of what we do. But in terms of medical societies, that's been a real challenge, I'll admit.
I appreciate it. In fact, you talked about universities. George Mason University, which is here where Cary and I live in Fairfax, Virginia, they're considering developing a course which deals with anti-Semitism in the profession. But how do you see and how do you think universities are dealing with this topic when they train doctors and nurses and technicians and pharmacists and others in the profession?
So one of the most discouraging parts or aspects of this for practitioners has been the blindness and deafness of the university administrators to it. There's always a yes, but there's two sides to it. There's never two sides to, you know, African American racism or anti-Latino racism, but with Jews, there's always a second side, and that has been a real problem. I think that the average administrator in a university, med school, nursing school, really has no idea what anti-Semitism is. They don't, they think of it as, something that Nazi Germany, we beat Nazi Germany, and we beat the Russians, so it's all over for that. So I don't think that there's an understanding of it, and it's been a big frustration. And that's why we want to start early in doctors and nurses training. We want to get them to understand, what was the role of anti-Semitism in medicine? What was the role of Jews in medicine? We have our contributions to medicine and physiology and psychiatry are way beyond our numbers. I mean, and we need to understand that why that is, because for several reasons. One is the emphasis we place on saving lives, and two, quite frankly, it was a profession that many people just were not interested in. And it was considered below the dignity to work with bodies in parts of the world. So that is our real task, is going to the universities. We're slowly, we're trying to do carrot and stick. The carrot is, we'll come in, we have resources to help you with educating it. But the stick is our organizations like the Brandeis Law Center, Stand With Us, Lawfare. So there are legal avenues for us, and you probably have heard that there have been a couple of Title VI and VII settlements in the last couple of days, owing to these anti-Israel and anti-Semitic instances in certain universities.
Very disturbing to hear.
Very, very.
We have a question online from Jerry. As a Jewish doctor, did you find it difficult to obtain privileges at hospitals, especially Christian managed hospitals, or do you know of others who had those difficulties?
Privileges have not been an issue, in the past, because nowadays it's very, very difficult to refuse privileges. Basically, if someone comes to your hospital and says, "Here are my credentials. I'm board certified. I'm board certified. I passed my exams. I have insurance. I want to be in your hospital." They really have no out. They cannot refuse you. The few times they have their lawsuits, and those are no hospital would do that now, because that's like they're just wasting money on their legal counsel. So getting privileges today at hospitals is not like it was in the past. That has not been the issue. The one question is the number of Jewish students in medical school has dramatically dropped. And we don't have the data to see how much of it is acceptance and how much is it is Jewish kids just not wanting to go into medicine, in part because of these problems, but also, quite frankly, it isn't as lucrative as it was before. It's not as, it's not as independent. You're sort of working almost as a cog in a wheel in certain systems. So the number of Jews in medical school has gone down. We have not figured out the acceptance rate. In ways it's hard, because right now you cannot sit there and say how many Catholics do you have, how many Jews do you have in your school. So that's been a hard thing to figure out. But we do mentor. We do mentor because we still think it's a great, it's a great profession. I mean, you really get to, for me as an orthopedic surgeon, I was in charge of the trauma program, and I would see someone, banged up after an accident. And then, 6 months later, he's in my office hugging me. He's back at work, working up and down ladders and stuff. So medicine is to me, is a great profession. It does so much for humanity. And so we're trying to mentor them, but the numbers are down, and I don't have the answer.
I think that would be a great task, a great goal of the AJMA, to see the reasons for that and encourage students to do that. I think that would be a wonderful benefit. Another question online, besides job barriers for Jewish doctors, Have you seen a trend in patients refusing to be treated by Jewish doctors?
There's the famous story up in Rockland County where a guy called the EMS and said, "Don't send in a Jewish technician." And of course, they did. There have been. I mean, there are incidences of patients saying, I don't want Jewish doctors. Don't give me a Jewish doctors." The problem has been more the other way. Doctors either refusing or undertreating. There's a story at Columbia where a young Israeli student was at student health, and they kept not seeing her, and she could hear this argument: "I'm not seeing that Israeli. I'm not seeing that Zionist." So those things are happening. Patients are, kids come in with parents come with their kids injured, and someone comes in with a from the river to the sea, while you're treating someone. I mean, that's like intolerable. I mean, leave your politics aside. You want to advocate for a cause, that's fine. But not, when you're seeing a patient, there should be one thing in front of you, and that's the patient. And that's the Geneva. We have the Hippocratic Oath, but more modernly, we have the Declaration of Geneva, which is basically says all I will see in front of me is the patient, nothing else, not their ability to pay, not their color, not their language. I will see the patient, and that is being ignored today, and we're seeing that in those
So,
cases.
AJMA has documented those
Yeah,
instances.
we have a reporting. If you go to the website, you'll see there is a reporting area. Right now, we don't do anything with the reports. We evaluate them, and then if we think they're egregious, we send them on to one of the as I say, either Stand With Us, the Lawfare Project, or Brandeis, to see if they're worth adjudicating. Obviously, our first step is to try to discuss it with the entity involved. Now, just recently, we had a former Surgeon General from the Israeli Army come and talk about the amazing things that they have done. They've taken the the mortality rate in war, which normally is around 15%. They brought it down to 6.5% with just ridiculous amount of innovation. And this gentleman who had ties to the University of Maryland, having trained there, was invited, and due to pressure from CARE, everyone knows what CARE is, right? The Council on American Islamic Relations, as well as another Muslim organization, protested, and they could no longer guarantee this gentleman's security and had to disinvite him. So we're seeing that. I mean, BDS is wrong. Academic boycotts is even more wrong. But a medical boycott to say that this gentleman's politics is so important to me that I don't want the trauma center to learn how to save lives in an inner city area. We know what Baltimore's like. We know what shock trauma is like. It's the leading trauma center. Baltimore's one of the more violent cities. And you're saying we don't care. We don't want to hear how to save lives. It's much more important that we protest it. So that's something we dealt with. We assembled allies. We talked to people and made sure that Maryland knew. And it is being resolved. The gentleman has been re-invited. We don't have a date for it, but those are the things that we do. And our preference is to work, collaboratively with organizations and not resort to, hitting them over the head unless we have to. But we're prepared to.
And that same doctor spoke a few days before at
Yes.
the Jewish Community Center here in Northern Virginia. Again,
Yeah.
very close to where Cary and I
Right.
live and where our shul is. And he gave a fantastic presentation. And it was almost humorous. He says, the real job of a doctor is make sure that when we're giving them treatment, we don't kill the patient.
Yes.
Give treatment and you don't kill the patient, you've done a good job. I
Well,
thought
that's
that was a little
that's
bit odd.
No, what he was saying is that it's true. There are really three in life. There's three categories, right? There's the ones you can't save, the ones that he said there's the ones that no matter what you do will survive, and then there's the big one. And we talk about convincing people of our position. We say that there's the people that are on our side. There are the people that you're wasting your time, the haters, and it's always that middle. Really, every outreach that you do, every effort you do, is really in that middle group, the one that your intervention is going to make a difference. So that's more what he was saying.
But it was very clear, and the audience sort of nervously laughed, but they said, "Oh, okay, yeah, we got to them." But he
Yeah,
was
the
very
doctors in
good.
there,
Yeah,
the doctors understood that.
And we're very sorry that he had that incident in Maryland. Hopefully
Yeah,
he will be there. And that event, by the way, was co-sponsored between AJMA and the Friends of the IDF.
right.
So it was a
Yeah,
great event, very well
that was a
attended.
great, yeah, that was good.
Another question online. What is your organization doing to help combat the various medical seminars that speak about healthcare in war zones and
Yeah.
genocides? Healthcare undermines Gaza, so forth and so on.
Yeah, that is one of our bigger tasks at this point. Um, it- in some ways, they're difficult because they pop up. Um, you know the game Whack-A-Mole when you go to the beach? That's what this is like. You find out there's someone talking at this institution. You speak to them, but by the time you find out about it, and what you find is that administration oftentimes in these places they plead we don't know it's First Amendment rights, it's all this other stuff, and we talk to them about a medical school is supposed to teach medicine. So that means that if you want to give a lecture on treating war injuries, civilian casualties, talk to us about what you do, how you save these lives, how you took care of them. Starting to pontificate about weaponry and tactics is just it's out of your expertise. You don't give lectures on things that are out of your expertise. It is a big issue. It's not just seminars, there are papers that are being written, a lot of them on dubious science, and it is a major undertaking. We do have a journal writing chapter that has been addressing a lot of this, but as well as you can imagine, it is hard to get pro-Israel literature in mainstream journals. Lancet, the JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, the New England Journal of Medicine. It's hard to get these things into writing. Now, to their credit, I don't think the New England Journal of Medicine has had really much about the war. They've learned not to get it involved too much. JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, has to some extent. But it is a real challenge, both in terms of the volume of it, the perniciousness, the mendacity of it, and the difficulty in combating it. And that is a major, major undertaking that we do. That's why we need members, because we can't do anything unless we find out about it. And so we find out about it, because more and more members join. They find, hey, listen, this is a terrible thing happening to our schools, to our peers, and they get a hold of us. They join. And we can find out about it, and we can deal with these things.
Okay. Um, uh, you mentioned about medical students and that there are less Jewish students going into medical school. Um, how do prospective medical, nursing, and other students in the medical profession face anti-Semitism in medical schools or afterwards?
So one of the things that's happening a lot of, medical school is a lot more um, cooperative now. So like when you come to med school, usually groups are formed for study purposes, and Jews are finding out that they're being excluded. We don't want you. You're a Zio, so we don't want you in our group. Or wow, we found out that you protested for Israel. We're throwing you out of our support group. When I went to Israel with the UCLA group, I met an amazing young woman. She is half Korean, half Jewish. Her father met her mother in Korea during the war. She came here and converted, and she is a firebrand for Judaism. And she has been excluded from so many of their social groups because of her activism on behalf of Israel. Um, but in a lot of these universities, they're being excluded. Um, they're being told we don't want you. There was a recent incident in UCSF where there's a real anti-Semitic, anti-Israel woman, Rupa Maya, and she posted that coming this semester, so this is back in the summer, there's going to be someone who was from Israel coming to UCSF medical school. What are we going to do about this? We don't want him here, et cetera, et cetera. It was so egregious that UCSF, which is one of the worst players, actually suspended her. And that's what it took. It took sort of nearly threatening an incoming medical student to get someone suspended. Now, UCSF, if you remember, is the place where they were one of the places where they had protests outside cancer centers. They were screaming from the river to the sea, late at night, or outside a cancer hospital. Outside a cancer hospital, they were disturbing, patients who were fighting for their lives, undergoing some of the worst moments of their life. And outside, you hear someone yelling from the river to the sea, globalize the Intifada, Zionists die. So.
Glad to hear. So we've seen a lot of calls. You've given us a lot of great information and verifying this. So what is the protection afforded today to fight anti-Semitism in the medical profession, if any?
So, I mean, the protection is, the protection obviously is multi. On the first level, it's interpersonal relationships with these institutions. Part of it is convincing them that just like they don't want to be called racist, they don't want to be called anti-Semites, and that's a hard thing. So it starts with these interpersonal relationships. Then it starts with, legal intervention. Most of the legal intervention that's done is usually letter writing, because once a letter comes from a legal firm that, you're in violation of Title VI and Title VII, usually action happens. Just to review, Title VI rules against discrimination in education. Title VII is in the workplace. We do have congressional hearings, as you've seen, and that sometimes is a big threat. No one really wants to go. No one wants to replicate what happened to, Harvard, Penn, MIT, and Columbia. No one wants to be that anymore. So those are the weapons that we use. But as I said, our preference is really to teach. We think a lot of this is ignorance. We think the bulk of the people that are doing these things are usually out of ignorance in the middle ground, and they've been persuaded. The younger generation really feels motivated to do things, and they don't feel motivated to get information, and they're happy to take it from where they are. And then let's face it, you show a picture of a wealthy, Israeli, in his nice car, and you show a picture of a Palestinian, in supposedly in a camp or something, and that motivates people, but they don't really understand the truth of it. So educating. It's a challenge because we live in an era now where there's people are saying on both left and right that there really is no truth. It's my narrative, your narrative, but it doesn't matter, and don't even talk to them about facts. They're not interested in facts. They're interested in narratives. So, but that's a big part of it is education. And if need be, if there are incidents, it is taking action, and it runs from a simple thing of discussing it with administration, making them see what the issues are, to threats of legal intervention. And usually it's a little of both. It's usually the carrot and the stick of what we find works.
Gosh. Another question.
And just to add that you added all the other schools, and it's very important to understand that it is in other schools as well. Clinical psych is and mental health in general is one of the worst ones. Public health is really bad. So it's I don't think the chaplaincy is bad though, and as you said, I don't think the vet schools are bad.
We happen to have Dr. Steve Mandel. If you can hear me, Steve, if you wanted to offer any comments, Steve is very active in the New York Metro chapter of FJMC, and he's also on the National ADL Commission. Was very active in that. I sent a note to him. I don't know, Steve, but if you would like to, just unmute yourself and offer any comments anytime or something in the chat if you'd like.
Well, thank you very much for your organization. I think that it's very difficult to get physicians to make a commitment. And I applaud you and the organization for having gathered together physicians who are from all marks of the spectrum to participate for a joint purpose. It's very interesting that medical schools have DEI committees, health equity committees, but generally anti-Semitism is not on the agenda. And that's maybe something that you could think of promoting, that I've tried to promote with a group of Jewish students participating in the DEI committee, as opposed to as opposed to the orientation to different organizations and people of color. Do you have any comments?
Yeah, so DEI has been a major issue for us. DEI in of itself, like every other tool in the world, can be used for good and can be used for bad. There's no question that, we want inclusivity, we want diversity. The problem really is the equity, because the equity basically comes down to everything is judged by numbers, which is actually a very lazy thing to do. If you want to have more minorities in there, figure out what the block is. When I went to Israel last year, we went around to the various universities because the universities in Israel had found out that the amount of Haredim and the Arabs were not up to what they wanted. They were not represented in school. So instead of doing DEI, what they did was they went out and they investigated what the blocks were. For Haredim, it was classes with mixed gender, and so they said, listen, we'll create classes, the option of having classes, men only, women only, as long as everyone, I know separate but equal sounds terrible in America, but that worked. What was the stumbling block with Arabs? Well, in Israel, if you are in an Arabic school, you learn in Arabic and you have limited Hebrew. And so acquisition of Hebrew was a real big problem. And they went in and they made sure that the Hebrew skills went up. In Israel, 70% of pharmacists are Arabic. The number of the percentage of students in university in Israel is basically what it is in the country. It's like 30% in universities. So DEI can be done properly, but the lazy way is just to say, oh, we don't have enough representation, let's just put more in. That's not fair to anybody. But that is one of the things that we want understood. Some of the problems are that a lot of the DEI officers tend to be incredibly either ignorant, anti-Semitic, or a little of both. They really don't understand what Judaism. We've been told multiple times, you don't get DEI, you don't get a Heritage Month because you're just a religion. And people have trouble understanding. I talked about anti-Semitism. Where I really should have started is, what is a Jew? Not who is a Jew. I'm never going to touch that, but what is a Jew? And most people don't understand that it's not a faith. It's an ethno-religious. It's a nation. It's a people. It's a language. It's a land. It's a religion, and it's complex. Guess what? It's too difficult for people to understand. They just file it under religion. You don't get religion. Getting employee resource groups in hospitals is another thing that we do, and getting students to argue for anti-Semitism teaching and appreciation of what is Jewish is a really big part of it. So that, yes, the DEI is like a double-edged sword. I mean, it should have been, if constructed properly, it should have been a tremendously good weapon, and it's been corrupted in part, I think, by laziness.
Excellent on that, Steve. Thanks.
By the way, wait, Steve, are you a member of AJMA?
Not at this time. Thank you.
All right. We need people with people that, because we need overlap between the different organizations. We need numbers, we need eyes and ears, we need especially brains and people who can write and think and have connections. So please, anyway.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
All right. Cary is selling there. Thanks, Cary. Cary, another question online. Do medical school admission committees currently restrict or reduce or keep the number of admissions from groups from certain groups of people for admission? Do they actively, overtly do that in your experience?
So where we've learned a lot is from the UCLA experience, in part because they have a very vocal Jewish group. The Jewish JFrog, it's the Jewish Faculty Resiliency Group, and they are very, very vocal in UCLA and California. But there have been, their quotas are outlawed, but they are actually still in place. I mean, there's studies that show what is it that you need to get into med school based on the combination of grades and MCAT testing versus race, and it's the numbers are very different for white, for African Americans, for Latin, and for Asian Americans. And that's been a major really source of issues because Jews are now, they're white, so you need to have these higher grades. Same thing happens for Asian Americans that have, high academic standards. So that is being done. So I don't think anyone's sitting there saying, like in the old days, we only want 2 Jews in our class, but it's more we need the BIPOC to go up, the Black, Indigenous, and people of color. We want those numbers to go up. And so, we're worried about, if you have kids that are not doing as well, but admit it because of other issues than academics. We understand that the bigger part really should be not race as much as income levels and things like that. Yes, if that winds up admitting more minorities, fine. But it can't just be, you just can't sit there and say, we're going to let this guy in because we need to increase our numbers. You have to find out why these kids are not coming in, why they don't go, and improve that. Schools need to be made better. I personally, this is not an AJMA position. I think it's criminal that school budgets are made by locally based on real estate, taxes and stuff like that. I think that's criminal. I just think that we should have better education here, and I think that's a big part of it. There are other issues as well that I don't want to go into, but the fact of the matter is that Israel showed that you can increase minority presence in universities by going after the problem and not artificially raising the numbers.
We have a question from another congregant at Olam Tikva congregation, Peter Mayer. Hello.
I see him.
Ask your question, sir.
Yes, Cary, thank you so much. I'm learning so much from you this evening, just like I do
Thank
every
you.
time you deliver a devar at Olam Tikva. Forgive me, you may have touched on this. I was called away for a couple of minutes, but have you personally experienced anti-Semitism in a medical setting over the years?
I have not. Fairfax is a very interesting place. It's actually diverse because it's just as attractive and diverse. About the only incident we had in the last 2 years was that someone kept swiping the Israeli flag off the Christmas tree. And I went into the office to find out what's going on, and they said someone keeps swiping it, and then when that goes, the Palestinian flag goes, so we just decided not to put them on there. That has literally been now I don't know what goes on, in conversations, but look, we know that people of similar backgrounds are going to talk bad about other people. But in terms of, no, there has just not been that. We have not seen that. Now, that's at Fairfax Hospital. Across the river at Georgetown and especially GW, it's been a cesspool. GW actually had the guy with the final solution go, the final solution sign, and people with Nazi salutes, and Georgetown has been somewhat of an issue. The problem that I didn't really touch on is the whole issue of not wanting to speak up has been a major problem. People are just afraid for their careers. They don't want to speak up about it. They're afraid they're going to get doxxed. They're afraid they're going to not advance in their careers. And that has been a major problem. A lawsuit at UCSF has really never happened because too many people are just afraid of losing advancement. And that in of itself is a problem. People are afraid to complain, that's a problem. We have these avenues of addressing wrongs that are done, and people are afraid of being basically doxxed because of it. So that is a major issue. And even when they go complain, their complaints are sort of, it's really nothing. It's you're being oversensitive, or it's not anti-Semitism, or the guy was an Arab, so he's a Semite too. It's not anti-Semitism. So
when you mentioned GW, George Washington University and Georgetown, I think you were referencing the campus, the virulent campus atmosphere, but not at their hospitals, right?
Not as much. Not that I've heard of. I have not heard. I've not heard. Now, I'm also in orthopedics, which is, if you follow stuff like Canary Mission and physicians, you see very few orthopedic surgeons that are listed for anti-Semitic stuff. We tend to be a very conservative group. There's just not as much. And I think, as you move to primary care, you see a lot more progressive, and unfortunately, that's where the problem is coming. I'm not saying that's where all of anti-Semitism is coming, but within medicine, you see it more in the progressive lanes. So I've been spared. I've been in a really good hospital, and I've been in a profession where you don't see it that much. The Journal of Bone and Joint Surgery has not published any of these nonsense articles. They're just not going to accept it. So I've been spared, but you're right. I haven't heard much going on at those areas, other than the campus.
Last question for the evening. You and your colleagues have been on Capitol Hill, educating. You're not lobbying because you're a 501c3, but you've been educating. How well do you think your educational efforts have gone with our U.S. congressman?
Always hard to tell because there's so many different strings pulling on them. The one thing I will say was that we visited, an equal number of on both sides of the aisle, and many of them were veterans of the hearings in September, and they were all, to a person, they were all surprised at that this was going on in medicine. They sort of, I don't say accepted, but they could see where it would happen. Sorry, on campus and in general, but to them, the hospital medicine was a sacred apolitical space. Nothing was going to happen there. And, they were very, very surprised. Now, what are they going to do about it? That's a separate thing. But again, and then quite frankly, a couple of months ago, we had another meeting with in front of Congress as well, similar things. So, it's always hard to gauge, but you and I went to the JCRC meeting just before about going down to Richmond. I think with Congress, with the assemblies, it's constantly getting it in their face. This is what's going on. Be aware of it. Be aware of it. Be aware of it. And the key thing is really the staffers. Congressmen just smile and kiss babies. The staffers do all the work. And that's where you have to go. You have to get to the staffers, make them understand, see the numbers, see what's going on, see why it's important.
I appreciate it. Just the last comment, just to read to you, not a question, from Dr. Markowitz. He said, I ran a unit at Georgetown University Hospital years ago with no anti-Semitism. They had no issue with me removing the Catholic cross from my office wall. And my niece graduated from Georgetown University Medical School and had no issues being Jewish. So that's firsthand evidence of that, and that's good to hear. And also very happy you removed the Catholic cross as well. So thank you, Dr. Markowitz, for that. Cary, we appreciate it very much, and thank you all for being on here. We made a recording of this. You'll find it online on the website. The Committee for Combating Anti-Semitism has a page, so that's where we restore all these recordings from past webinars. And we hope that we'll see some of you in Chicago at the workshops. We will have more webinars leading up to it. Our next one is tentatively with the ADL, but we appreciate all of you being online. And Cary, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Mazel
Tov,
and
thank you.
All
right, you're welcome. All right, Visa Latashla.
Visa Latashla for those Hungarian speakers. We just said see you later.
All right,
thank you all very much. Have a good evening.
Thanks. Bye.